Just remembering the suffering of all six realms. We are going to study and practice in the light of wisdom, study in order to help those sentient beings out of samsara, to relieve their suffering. Above my head, on a blossoming lotus and sun and moon disk seed, appears Kuru Padmakara, the lotus-born embodiment of all the victorious ones. Dusam Sanjay Guru Rinpoche Nadugada Dewa Chenpo Sham Bache Kusa Dada Bosa So Adem So Chinji Lam De So Chinan Zawe Bache Heshe Wada Sambaluki Chomba Chinjilo. Embodiment of Buddhas of past, present, and future. Guru Rinpoche, the master of all cities, Guru of great bliss, dispeller of all obstacles, wrathful subjugator of Maras, to you I pray, inspire me with your blessing so that outer, inner, and secret obstacles are dispelled, and all my aspirations are spontaneously fulfilled. From the four centers on the Guru's body, light radiates out and dissolves into my four centers. Through this, the four obscurations are purified, and I obtain the four empowerments. Visualize this. Guru Padmakara dissolves into light and becomes one with me, and I meditate on the inseparable unity of the Guru and my own mind. Lotus born, you're inseparable from our original nature. Your realm, the copper colored mountain of glory, is our experience in its purity. May we take birth in this primordial pure realm, the uncontrived natural state, appearance and awareness indivisible. Okay. So we are in Light of the Wisdom, Volume 1, on page 75. We are continuing on the chapter called The Meaning of the Ground. And so, just to review what we went over, the ground is the basis of everything. And we said that it has two qualities. It's aware, which is sometimes called luminosity, which is a little bit confusing, right? It's the a mind's ability to cognize or perceive. That's what's called luminosity in these translations. And I know that doesn't always line up, but it also corresponds to the light of the mind. So, like in the Sambhogakaya realm, in dark retreat, in Togal practice, the light in that level is the light of the mind, right? So that's why it's called luminosity. But from the perspective of bumpkins like me, that's a little weird, right? Because you just think of photons, but it's not that. And it's also empty, which means that it cannot be established as anything whatsoever. That anything you could say about it would be dualistic and therefore incorrect, and it's unfindable. There's no concrete or permanent essence to it. So it's not God, and it's not nothing, right? That's what these two things basically prevent. Any kind of solid statement you could make about it is would be reifying and fall into logical error according to the Madhyamaka philosophy, which if you want to really study that, then just study the wisdom chapter and the way the Bodhisattva. That's the best explanation you'll ever get on those teachings. So the Glorious Garland Sutra teaches using the opposite reasoning of the Uttara Tantra. If you did not have the potential for awakening, you would not feel weary of pain. You would not desire nirvana, nor would you pursue or even aspire for it. I still think this is like an absolutely incredible statement, right? So, one of the proofs that we have Buddha nature is that we are not content. Our suffering is a sign that we have this potential. Otherwise, we'd be perfectly satisfied with this conditioned existence. But because we are not, because we long for happiness, that happiness must be something pulling us or that we are seeking. And that happiness is our own true nature, the ground. And as Marco so lovely pointed out last week, that the aspiration of Samantabhadra in the Dzogchen style has that opening line, one ground, two paths, This is a very helpful way to remember. So the ground is neutral. It's awake and aware and it's empty. But then you have two paths. You have confusion and liberation. Confusion means you don't recognize the ground. Liberation means you do recognize the ground. And so at the origin of the ground, Samantabhadra was the very first being to recognize the ground. He didn't stray into samsara at all and was immediately enlightened. He immediately recognized his nature. And so he was established as the first Buddha. On the other side, you had every other sentient being who did not recognize that as their own nature. And that produced all of the proliferation that we now know as samsara. And then the other Buddhas who came later over time as they recognized this ground. The scripture continues by positively establishing the reason, perceiving the faults of suffering and the virtues of happiness. And this is another incredible aspect. People often kind of wonder, well, if everything's emptiness, then what is good and evil, right? Like, or virtue and non-virtue. This seems to make no sense in a world that's empty, right? But this essence has love as part of its nature, right? Because we always remember that Rigpa has three traits. Rigpa has emptiness, luminosity, or the capacity to perceive, and compassion. And so this compassion is the love aspect. This is why virtue gets you closer, makes it easier to recognize the ground, and non-virtue makes it harder to recognize the ground, obscures you further. Not virtue makes it less obscured, right? Eventually, we need to transcend both virtue and non-virtue because they are both conceptual and karmic and arise in awareness. But if you have a lot of obscurations, a lot of non-virtue, then you will not be able to perceive the ground, and you much less realize it, right? So that's why merit production is always an important part of the path, all the way until complete Buddhahood, purification and accumulation of merit. Results from having the potential, because without potential, sentient beings would have no such perception. Since the Sugata essence does not have the character of being produced from causes and conditions, it is beyond the reach of concepts, such as continuous or momentary, permanent or impermanent, and thus it is not subject to destruction. Moreover, it is taught to be the unconditioned because it possesses the four qualities of being permanent, stable, quiescent, and unchanging. As it is said, the nature of mind, like the element of space, is devoid of causes and without conditions. It is not a gathering and has no arising. Also, it is subject to neither destruction nor subsistence. So all of the display of infinite things that arose out of the basis are nothing but temporary apparent modifications of that basis. Nothing ever really happened, right? So that's this important point, that this whole experience, that's why when full Buddhahood realization is attained, it's as though nothing ever happened. But because we find ourselves obscured, lost in this delusion, like seeing a rope and thinking it's a snake, right? There never was a snake, but we experience the fear, the trepidation, the frustration around experiencing this snake until we know it's not a snake. And then as soon as we know it's not a snake, we know for certain it never was a snake and was never really the danger we thought it was going to be. Right. So this is the kind of the process we're going through. We still think it's a snake. Even if you have some conceptual understanding that it's not, you do believe it because you still perceive this world as solid, and you still believe there's a sense of I, and you fear death, and elements affect you, and you can't walk through walls. All these things would change if you really knew there was no snake. That realization was really thorough enough. It is also said it's unconditioned since its nature is forever beyond destruction. This indestructibility is stability, and thus it is taught to be stable and so forth. There are many other such statements, since in its real mode of being, its essence is unborn. It is empty like space. Its nature is unceasing luminosity, and its expression of unity is the intrinsic state of awareness. The Tantra of self-arising awareness explains, the essence of this space is like the sky. Its nature is self-luminous, and its expression remains the essence of awareness. Thus, it is the basis for all qualities to arise. That is, Buddha nature appears to be confused or liberated merely results from labeling on the part of sentient beings, while in fact it is subject to neither confusion nor liberation. Saying that space or the sun is obscured or unobscured by clouds merely refers to the mistaken perception of samsaric beings on the ground, while both are beyond being or not being obscured. So, right, if you're in an airplane high above the clouds, then to talk about the clouds obscuring the sun is silly. It makes no sense, right? Because the clouds are below the sun. But from the perspective of the earth, which is analogous to samsara, the sun is obscured by the clouds. That's why the samsara is very much still real for us. This is why virtue still matters and harm still matters, because we don't know that. We don't see the unobscured sun. We see the obscured sun. So until those clouds are removed, we need to keep working on all of these conditions that we are presented with. The luminous nature of mind is changeless like the sky. These temporary stains, desire, and so forth, resulting from incorrect thinking, cannot disturb it. Again, the clouds do not affect the sky. They only appear to from the perspective of samsara, right? So all of the confused dualistic thinking is only an apparent obscuration, but they don't actually modify the ground in any way. The Guhya Garbha Tantra expounds the thoughts of believing in a self-entity persistently ties knots in the sky, beyond bondage and beyond liberation. These are the primordial attributes of the spontaneously perfect Buddha. This is because, like the sky, its nature is the middle way, free from duality and totally uninvolved in all constructed extremes like present or absent, existing or non-existing, permanent and annihilated, arising and ceasing, and so forth. Just as the Mahaparinirvana Sutra says, the Buddha nature present in sentient beings is like the sky. As the sky has no past, future, or present, neither inside or outside, and is not comprised of form, sound, smell, taste, or texture, so also it is the Buddha nature. The Vajra Dome states, in the element of space, whatever exists in the thousands of world systems, the awakened one, the Mahamudra of perfect great bliss, remains present like the sky. This essence itself has neither samsaric defects to be discarded and cleared away, nor nirvanic virtues to be established or added. The Uttara Tantra gives the reason. Since the faults are temporary and because the virtues are naturally present, its characteristic is that of being unchanging. It is the same after as it was before. So the love is a character of this Rigpa, right? As sufficient obscurations are removed and enough realization happens, then love automatically arises in addition to cognizance. And that's the point I'm making about the importance of that. Both the Uttara Tantra and the Ornament of Realization agree. From this, there is nothing whatsoever to remove, nor even the slightest thing to add. Look truly into the true. To see the true is total freedom. Therefore, with no concepts of samsara and nirvana being good or bad, to be accepted or rejected, it is free from all partiality and all pervasive like the sky. The Uttara Tantra describes, just as the sky is all pervading, of a nature free from thought. The stainless space of mind's nature similarly pervades everywhere. The ground of the imagined, the confused state. The Lamrim Ningpo root text says, due to the great demon of co-emergent and conceptual ignorance from the solidified habitual patterns of grasping and fixation and the different perceptions of worlds and inhabitants, the 6 classes of beings appeared as a dream. Within this naturally luminous essence that is like the sky appeared the obscuring temporary veils like clouds rising. In other words, co-emergent ignorance arose simultaneously with the pure nature. That is to say, it was not recognized for what it was, without being before or after like gold and slag. Conceptual ignorance means conceptualizing that something exists while it does not exist. So this is dualistic thinking in all the manner of not understanding. So when the co-emergent ignorance means that upon we don't recognize the ground immediately, and because we don't recognizing it, then we go into conceptual proliferation, right? This is the chains of dependent arising, and this is how we get this feeling of a self that's separate from other, and that's all the conceptual ignorance that has the subject object confusion. These two are the basis from which all confusion arises and are the great demon that creates all kinds of faults. Their nature not being recognized, the habitual tendencies of thinking in terms of duality, perceived object, and perceiving mind gradually increased and solidified. And from this appeared the different kinds of diluted experiences of dualistically grasping at and fixating on various outer vessel like an inner content like sentient beings, the six classes of beings with different kinds of environments, sense objects, status, bodily forms, and actions without a single one of them actually existing, just as in a dream after having fallen asleep. In order to explain the meaning of this a little, there are 5 points. The ground of confusion. Confusion arising from the presence of the basis is like the cognitive act that apprehends a muddled rope to be a snake, because of the existence of snakes. Confusion arising from no presence is like seeing an apparition of hair in the sky. Confusion arising from indivisibility is like camphor, the identity of which has two abilities and therefore can be medicine for a disease of heat or a poison for the disease of wind. So, as I already explained, we can misperceive the rope to be a snake, and that's how we believe this concrete sense of self is real, and there's other, all of that is all just incorrect information about what's happening. Then the confusion arising from no presence is like seeing an apparition of a hair in the sky. This is like a hallucination, right? Like this is coming from our own visual perception, but we are misperceiving it to be something arising in the other, but it's actually ourselves. And confusion arising from indivisibility is like camphor, which is a medicine where it's for heat or poison for the disease of wind. So if you have a fever and you're given camphor, that'll bring your fever down. But if you don't have a fever and you take camphor, it's going to give you a vata disorder, right? A wind disorder. So it depends on the right medicine. So the right medicine is to emphasize emptiness because we've taken things to be solid. But emptiness itself can become a poison if you reify it, right? So we don't want to reify the medicine. The medicine 99% of the time is emptiness. They're always talking about that because we think everything's real and substantial, but that can be a poison just as much and a more dangerous poison at that if we believe in nothingness. The great Mahasiddha Saraha said, people who believe in the substantial reality of things are stupid like cows, but people who believe in emptiness are even more stupid. And so I always remember this. Um, so emptiness is not a thing. It just means you can't find, that's all it is. Can't find separateness. Can't find a separate solid existing self or a separate solid existing anything. That's all emptiness means. It does not mean a nothing. That's not real. The causes of confusion, the Guhyagarbha Tantra states the defects of the root of existence spread from the notion of a self. Thus, the general cause of all samsaric phenomena is precisely the concept of a self-identity. In particular, the indirect cause is the single nature ignorance that remains present as a subtle act of recognizing the naturally pure and innate Sugata essence. And that's why this nature is very, very subtle. This luminous awakefulness, it's easy to try to pin it onto different experiences, right? The three essential experiences that people tend to try to pin it on are bliss, clarity, and non-thought. You always need to remember that bliss, clarity, and non-thought arise in Rigpa. They are not Rigpa, right? We never want to turn our nature into an object. And if it's a temporary experience that happens and then goes away, then how could that be our nature? This nature does not come and go. It is just this empty cognizance in which all these things arise. However, as we progress along the path and our mind calms down and the channels begin to flow smoothly, then bliss, clarity, and non-thought are signs of experience on the practice. So they're showing you that you're going the right direction, but don't mistake them for your nature. Your nature is not these things. These things are temporary experiences. Thought or no thought, bliss or pain, these are all experiences, right? They all arise in that empty cognizance. So you just keep going back, right? Don't get stuck in the phenomena, but also don't think that the phenomena is fundamentally separate from that nature. It's just the manifestation or an ornament of it. Mm. So, The concurrent cause is the ignorance that is co-emergent with the innate nature and remains present as the potential for confusion to arise when meeting with the right conditions. The cooperating cause is the conceptual mind consciousness. The conceptual ignorance, that is the mind apprehending itself as being subject and object. The perpetuating cause is karmic tendencies, the creation of which have the definitive power to yield their respective results. This could be a whole lecture series. I'm not going to try and break it all down for you, but you can just see that there's this different process of misapprehending the basis, grasping at experience, and then from that, you get the sense of self, and then you interact with it. This creates a chain of karma. And then you have this kind of continuing on. This is what we're in, right? We're in this like it has its own momentum at this point. That's why we don't have to keep creating samsara. Samsara already has this momentum from this confusion and karma. That's what karma really is, right? We keep spinning the wheel. We keep interacting. Every time we engage with phenomena as though it was real with a feeling of dualism, then we are perpetuating samsara, right? We're spinning, we're putting more motion into things. That's why karma means action, right? So we're putting more energy into the delusion every time we interact with phenomena with a strong sense of dualism. That is why, even when we're doing acts of virtue, as practitioners of Dzogchen, we want to minimize the subject object in the act of giving. This is what they always talk about freedom from the three spheres, right? Which is the spheres of the one giving, the recipient being receiving, and then the object being given. We want to let go of all those notions. We want to give in emptiness, as it were. Give in knowledge that there's no self, there's no other, and there's no object. We want to give without a lot of concepts. That's why we always are like, make the aspiration, let go. Do the thing, let go. We're training ourselves to act more and more without reifying our action, because if we think, I am going to do this virtuous act and I am going to get merit from this, that results in higher rebirths. It does not result in Buddhahood. What results in Buddhahood is bodhicitta, which is having let go of the results of your action to the benefit of all sentient beings and to devotion to the Lama, and then practicing without concepts, and then dedicating further performing and making sure that you're not clinging to the results of this action. So don't misunderstand the like recitation of refuge, bodhicitta, and dedication are not about just chanting something. It's about reminding you to do the action without this sense of self and other being so intense. Of course, there's a little bit, right? Like if we weren't, our action would be totally spontaneous, right? If you're really in Rigpa, then action rises with no intention, with no sense of self doing something. It just is arising in this display because you are now completely identified with the empty cognizance instead of identified with the body mind system performing activities. So we're working to try and be as subtle about it as we can. And this is one thing that Yidam practice helps. When we visualize ourselves as this rainbow light Yidam, this is softening our feeling of selfhood, right? And like Garchen Rinpoche always says, every moment you're thinking about the deity, you're not thinking about yourself, right? So this is a very helpful, skillful method to help you release this tendency and habitual clinging around your identity, so that your actions can be performed from this pure vision in which there is not so much of the sense of self and other, right? Like everyone's a Buddha in a Pure Land, right? So it's Buddha giving to Buddha. That's a lot closer to the truth and a lot closer to spontaneous action than I am performing an activity that is virtuous and I'm going to accumulate merit on that basis, right? That's a solidified and reified version of it. The mind consciousness can be divided into two aspects: the disturbed mind, which fixates on the all ground by thinking I am, making cognition disturbed, and the subsequent mind, which is the sixth sense cognitions that create flow of arising and ceasing and place the karmic powers in the all ground. The support for these two aspects and the retainer of all habitual tendencies and seeds is the basis for using the label confusion, and therefore all scriptural traditions define it as the all ground consciousness. The conditions for taking rebirth in the higher, lower, and upper realms are the three kinds of karmic action: meritorious, non-meritorious, and non-transferring. The activators of these karmic actions are the five disturbing poisons. When these causes and conditions come together, is a notice as soon as there is a sense of self, actions are tainted by poison, right? So if you think there's an I, then there's some selfishness to your action, whether it be aggression or generosity or whatever. It's tainted. It's not pure. That's why we're going for the paramitas, right? The paramita of generosity is generosity mixed with wisdom, which means there's no identity of a sense of self. It's just freely giving in open space. Ordinary generosity is still tainted by subtle feeling of attachment, aversion, all of this, ignorance, etc. When these causes and conditions come together, the result is the great wheel of samsara. There's never any impurity in the empty aspect, the nature of the Sugata essence, but the cognizant aspect has the ignorance of not recognizing its own natural face. In the first instant, the mind that creates formation stirs and conceptualizes a perceiver as being separate from the perceived. From this results the consciousness that perceives objects, and therein comes the sensations that arise by conceptualizing what can be accepted and rejected. From that comes the conceptions that apprehended objects have defining attributes, and through the solidification of the tendencies thereof, the physical forms arise, and thus the five aggregates are formed. This is how all of the five lights get reified into the five elements, get reified into the six realms. Through the grasping, an engagement with the illusion becomes more and more solid. This is the process he's describing in the Dzogchen terms of the 12 links of interdependent arising, and how once we see an object, and then in that perception of an object, we feel there's an I. It's an assumption, right? If there's a thing, then there must be an I, and that arises simultaneously, right? The sense of I and other happens all at once. That's why interdependence and is what the Buddha is trying to teach, that when you let go both. You have to release both. The sense of I and other arise together and fall apart together. Just as in the example of the outer dependent origination uninterruptedly arising through the six related causes, such as those of the seed, sprout, and so forth, and the six related conditions of the five elements and the changes of time, in the same way we circle throughout the three realms due to the interdependent origination, the 12 links of ignorance giving rise to formulation, and so forth. The creator, the threefold knowledge states, the instant that has continuity is described as the creator of karma. In this way, the unfabricated continuous instant is the creator of both samsara and nirvana. In particular, the creator of samsara is the continuous instant of confused thinking that apprehends the non-dual as being two. Its power becoming increasingly stronger, it connects confused cognitions into a chain and thus creates this endless samsara. So this feeling of time and motion and grasping is all tied together, right? So it creates this perception of a self, and then that perception of self does things and then experiences results, which creates the illusion of time. As we move through this experience of actions ripening into results, even though it's all arising in one ever-present moment, right, beyond a moment, but in this timeless dimension, because of the sequence, just like a film strip, you can have run in front of you and you stare at it directly, it feels like it's moving, but really you're looking in the exact same spot, but the perception of motion is happening because of the interaction and the sequential nature of the film across your visual experience. So this continuity of, oh, this happened, then that happened, and that makes sense that this happened because that happened, that all causes you to believe that the rope is a snake, right? Because you're just being baffled. But if you can step back into the projector and recognize, oh, I never move, I never arise, I never change, right? Like drop that word, but there is just this presence, there's just this awareness, there is just this love, and it's unchanging, and it's completely unaffected by this display that is rotating in front of me. The awareness itself does not get modified by the changing experiences. So we are training ourselves to stop grasping at the images and to abide in the ground as the ground. Its power becoming increasingly stronger connects confused cognitions in a chain and thus creates endless samsara. The result, because of the causes and effects of karmic deeds and disturbing emotions spinning like on the rim of a water wheel, one experiences the vessel-like world due to the general apparent karma and the contents like sentient beings due to the specific experienced karma as well as their ripenings. And I'm sorry, I know this is very philosophical, but it's very important that we have a good understanding of this as we move into the rest of it. The rest of the text will become much more practical. But having a pretty sophisticated philosophical understanding of what the foundation is makes all the difference in the world, right? Because your view will determine your result. And it's very easy to have an incorrect view about the basis. You can just assume it's any number of experiences or qualities to your mind, etc., and mistake them for being the basis. So we want to be really clear what we're talking about when we talk about the basis, because as I said, it poisons the rest of your path if you don't have this view very correct. So I apologize. I know it's a little bit complicated, and please feel free to ask questions if anything needs more explanation. From the results of consciousness that perceives objects, and therefrom comes the sensation that arises by conceptualizing what can be accepted or rejected. Is that right? No, wait, I'm down here. Because of cause and effects of karmic deeds and disturbing emotions spinning like a rim of a water wheel, one experiences a vessel-like world due to the general apparent karma and content like sentient beings due to the specific experienced karma as well as their ripenings. The meaning of this is explained in the Guhyagarbha Tantra. Imaho, from the Sugata essence, emanated by the karma of one's thinking, the places and the sufferings and so on are individually apprehended as me and mine. The luminous great perfection teaches that Samantabhadara's enlightenment in the original ground of liberation is to recognize the natural face, thus dispersing the direct causes for the eight consciousnesses into Dharmadhatu, the very moment the ground appearance of the spontaneous present nature manifests from the Sugatagarbha, the ground of the primordially pure essence. When this ground appearance is obscured by co-emergent ignorance and the conceptualized into perceiver and perceived, the eight gates of outward luminosity manifest like a dream from the precious sphere of spontaneous presence, and the confusion into samsara is unceasing. This is what is called sentient beings. This is why Dzogchen is the most profound of all practices, because if you just disengage from karma and allow the wheel to stop spinning, phenomena will eventually cease, right? This is what rainbow body, all those realizations are. All the karmic winds inside you cease, which stops the appearances on the outside, right? So we're internalizing, and the separation of self and other is literally coming to a conclusion. The fastest way is to stop touching it. Like a dirty water cup, you just set the cup down and don't mess with it, and the dirt will settle. Now, however, because we live in a world where we are constantly creating karmic actions because we're forced to still engage with people and things and objects all the time, we are stirring it up. So we want the stirring up to be as virtuous as possible, because that creates much less dense matter in the water than negative deeds. But that still holds true that the most profound thing you could do is just stop everything. Minimize your eating, minimize your grasping, minimize your interactions, minimize everything. If you could go into a 3-year retreat and just don't do anything, and that would be fantastic. Like if you could really stop. But if you can't stop, then you want to make sure that your Dzogchen on the inside, sutra on the outside, right? Concluding the chapter of the summary, the Lamrim Yeshin Ningpo root text says, although this is so, you have never moved and will never move from the original condition of the essence. Endeavor, therefore, in purifying the temporary stains. Although this is how samsara and nirvana have been conceptualized as being two, the confusion has continued since time without beginning. So just as the sky is never moved by the configurations of clouds, the original Sugata essence of primordial purity cannot possibly change from its beginning condition, basic condition, into anything other than its own nature. Consequently, up till now, it has not changed into the attributes of samsara and nirvana, and from now on, it will not change, though you might circle in samsara endlessly. For this reason, and because you will realize your natural face and awaken when your temporary stains of confusion are completely purified, exert yourself tirelessly in the means of purifying these stains. As Lalog describes, samsara and also nirvana are both without existence. When thoroughly understanding samsara, that itself is called nirvana. The two segments states, How all sentient beings are Buddhas themselves. However, they are obscured by the temporary stains. When these are cleared away, they are enlightened. Since the essence in itself is never tainted by temporary stains, by purification one can become free of them. The Guhyagarbha Tantra says, not fettered by anyone, it is unfettered. Nor is there something that could be fettered. In terms of sentient beings in general, it has been taught that samsara is without beginning or end. But in terms of the individual in particular, the Abhidharma Sutra says, although without a beginning, it has an end. Enlightenment, in other words. In this way, you will reach nirvana by purifying the stains through the path, and having purified them, the result will not reverse into the cause. Just like a person who has recovered from smallpox, thus it is reasonable to exert yourself on the path. So that is the end of the meaning of the ground. Like I said, that is a whole lot of philosophical information, and don't expect to understand it all right away. It definitely takes many, many years of sitting with this, meditating on it, studying it. But this has everything you need to know. It really does. But as I said, the foundation of it all is just to know that this ground, the same ground, produces both samsara and nirvana. The difference is rigpa or ma rigpa, right? Either you recognize it as the ground or you don't recognize it as the ground. And so when you recognize it as the ground, then you know there's nothing to accomplish, nothing to do, nothing to fix. And when you don't recognize it, you think that you're a self wandering through samsara. And as long as you're wandering through samsara, you want to have a bodhisattva sem, a bodhisattva mind. But whenever you are practicing, you want to try to be without concepts. You want to practice with minimal reification so that you can give some time for that water to settle. That's the main point. Recognizing that we're trying to work with as subtle of effort as possible. In the original Hinayana teachings of the Buddha, he really emphasized coarse effort, right? Sitting, practicing shamatha, then vipassana, and just tons of time on the cushion, and very progressive, very ascetic, avoiding desire, objects that bring up desire, avoiding objects that bring up aggression. All of these things, this ascetic level of practice was pretty coarse, and then it takes a long time and it's very difficult. Most of us can't even begin to approach that kind of approach to the path. So in this, we're using all of these things. So we need to become aware of our grasping and more be able to not engage with samsara with this much grasping over time. That's what the Tantra helps us do. Marie has a question. Can you explain more, please? What does that mean to be Dzogchen on the inside or Sutra on the outside, not Vajra? So that means bodhisattva activity, virtuous, kind, helpful, putting others first, putting yourself second. Those kind of actions should be how you behave in the world. As much as possible, you should know there's no one doing those actions and there's nothing to achieve, and recognizing your own nature. So you're trying to abide in that confidence of the view, but being as attentive to cause and effect as you possibly can with your actions. That's to be Dzogchen on the inside and Sutra on the outside. Anything else before I move forward? The 8 gates, there's a long footnote. Where is it that this is useful for where we are at? What is there? Let me look. And feel free to turn on your microphone if you want. Where are you seeing this, Grace? So I can.
It is the right before the concluding the chapter with a summary. So they were saying when this ground appearance is obscured by co-emergent ignorance and conceptualized into perceiver and perceived, the 8 gates of outward luminosity manifest like a dream. Blah blah blah, and so there is a footnote. This is what is called sentient being. So there's a footnote actually talking about the 8 gates, and I read a little bit about that, and I was like, I don't know what it's talking about. So
Which page number? Just because I'm not seeing.
I'm on Kindle, so I don't have a page number. The concluding the chapter with a summary is the paragraph right before that.
Okay.
The paragraph ends with
Yep.
this is what is called sentient being.
Yep, found it.
Yeah.
Let me just read this real quick. Okay, yeah. So this is the Dzogchen anatomy of the 12 links of interdependent of dependent arising.
Okay.
Um, so the I haven't received teachings on this, so I don't want to go into it too much because I don't know. Um,
I read about that in one of the Longchenpa texts, but and I also don't understand what he's talking about, so that's why I ask. Yeah.
yeah, I'll look into this, Grace.
Okay, thank
I
you.
have some resources and I will find out more. So there, it sounds like the different ways of arising from the ground, including samsara, but I'll look into this and I'll
Yeah,
put
I
that in
mean,
the
I'm more curious
WhatsApp.
what is it useful for us because it's so complicated, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what this, Dzogchen really is kind of like a section of Abhidharma,
Yeah.
so it's this precise study of how the mind works and how we attain realization. And so as practitioners,
Hmm.
I don't think you need too much detail, but just having
Yeah.
a basic understanding of one ground and two paths, I think is sufficient.
Okay.
But I'll look into it and I'll get back to you.
Okay,
Damien,
thank you.
just a note here. In Grace, I don't know if it would come up on Kindle, but if you press the footnote, the 200, it explains what the eight gates are. Um,
Yeah, I read it and I have no idea what he's
oh,
talking
okay, okay,
about.
because I think
Yeah,
that
it's very terse.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll look into it. I'll find out because I have some commentaries from Kempo Namdral that'll probably help me flesh it out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we'll move on to the explanation of the path that causes realization. There are two parts, a short statement by means of a summary and a detailed explanation of that. The short statement by means of a summary, the Lamrim Eshin Ningpo root text says, the stages of the path that bring about realization are innumerable. Purify your being, sow the seeds and cultivate them. Remove the hindrances and likewise bring forth enhancement. Thus enter the correct path through these five aspects. So these five aspects are an agricultural analogy being given by Guru Rinpoche for you to understand what you need to go through on the path. So first you need to purify your being. This is like breaking up the soil so that a seed can take root, right? So first we have prostrations and Vajrasattva, right? These are the primary methods where we break up the soil. We need to remove a sufficient amount of obscurations so that we can really start to make progress. Two, sow the seeds. This is the cultivation of merit. This is primarily the mandala offering, but also the seven branch prayer to the guru. These methods increase your merit. So once you've kind of brought the obscurations down to a sufficient dull roar, then you start to add in some beneficial qualities and merit. And then you need to cultivate them. That is to water and fertilize them. That is to practice again and again and again to help them. Just like if you planted, watered your seeds, and then walked away, they would dry up, right? So you have to keep watering them. You have to keep tending to them continuously. Remove hindrances. This is pulling up weeds. So different cognitive and behavioral defilements that cause you to not be able to stay in the view. That's really the primary things to look out for, right? Like anything where you get triggered, either addicted or irritated, and you can't let it go and you can't be in the view, that's something you need to deal with. And the best advice I've ever heard on this is that you always start with trying to liberate it directly through Dzogchen, right? You just recognize the ground and try to liberate the emotion you're experiencing. But if you can't liberate it through doing that, then you step it down and you visualize yourself as the Yidam and you try to transform the energy through the yidam. And if you can't do that, then you step it down to Tonglen or Sutra and you try to wish the opposite. So you try to breathe in the suffering and breathe out the positive merit you have to whatever is triggering you. So it works both ways. And then if that doesn't work, then you go to Hinayana and you sit and you do shamatha until you calm down. Right. So this is kind of the plan of action anytime you encounter a very strong and negative emotion that you can't liberate. Right. So the main goal is just to see the thought and the emotion as a thought and an emotion, and immediately it's liberated. But you have to have enough of power in your rigpa to be able to do that. And for our deeply entrenched habits, that's difficult. So then we want to move down the rungs on the ladder till we find the highest level practice that we can use to liberate the emotion. An inconceivable number of stages and paths of the sutra and mantra have been taught as the methods that bring about the realization of the inseparability of the ground and fruition. And that's why we're practicing the goal as the path, right? Yet when condensing these into one vital essence, the way to purify your being is like tilling a hard virgin field. The way to sow the seeds of ripening and freeing is like planting grain free from defects. The way to nurture them is like endeavor of farming, such as giving water and fertilizer. The way to remove hindrances of the path is like the exertion in protecting against hailstorms and the like. And the way to bring it forth is enhancements of qualities, is applying the means for improvement, such as bringing rain and so forth. Therefore, thoroughly enter the correct path by training correctly. In the path through these 5 aspects, you will realize the fruition of liberation like fully ripened crops. This tiny 2-page thing right here is explaining to you the whole path. Why all 9 yanas are useful, what we are doing, what Nundro is about, what Rushen is about, what deity practice is about. This is all contained here. And how we use this agricultural analogy. And of course, these were agricultural peoples. So that analogy was particularly adept, or whatever the word is, apt for them. So, but I think it's pretty easy to understand and helpful to remember. This includes 5 steps: purifying your being, sowing the seeds, cultivating them, removing hindrances, and bringing forth enhancement. Purifying your being. This has 2 points: the way to follow a spiritual guide, the root of the path, and having followed him, the way of mind training. So you will see that in the Nyingma and Dzogchen presentation, following the guru is step 1. This is the most important aspect of the path, because the guru serves all the functions, because your ego cannot get your ego out of samsara, right? There's no way for you to do that, because everywhere you turn, you are tainted, right? So we need something to come through that's untainted to help us access this kind of state and path, right? So we really have to be judicious, careful, and take seriously having a lama in this tradition. This is really, really crucial. In the Hinayana and the Mahayana, this isn't as crucial, right? You can just kind of have spiritual friends, a sangha. You don't need to have a guru, but in the Vajrayana and Dzogchen, you absolutely have to have a guru, and there's a proper way to follow them, and that's what this chapter is going to explain. How to follow a spiritual guide. The way to follow a spiritual guide, the root of the path. This has 4 parts: the characteristics of a master to be followed, how to follow the master, the characteristics of the disciples who follow him, and having followed him, how the oral instructions should be taught. The characteristics of the master are to be followed. The Lamar Mishi Ningpo root text says, first of all, is to purify your mind and being. The Vajra master, the root of the path, is someone who has the pure conduct of Samaya and vows. He is fully adorned with learning, has discerned it through reflection, and through meditation he possesses the qualities and signs of experience and realization. And with his compassionate action, he accepts disciples. Serve a master endowed with these characteristics. Now, as samsaric beings, we have no idea who a realized person is and who is not. So we have to make a best guess. And if we are waiting to find a perfect person, we will wait for a very, very, very long time. So we need to just basically find somebody who has deep compassion, is selfless, and knowledgeable of the whole path. That's the main thing. They need to know the practices. They need to know the general idea of the sutras and tantras, having received authentic transmission and lineage through an authentic transmission and lineage, and that they basically act with kindness and compassion and are serving those on the path towards their realization. He's not causing large amounts of suffering. You don't see a lot of conflict. You don't see a lot of being taken advantage of. He or she is content with very little. Is able to actualize the path. Dzongkhar Khyentse Rinpoche talks about, you can even try and steal their girlfriend or like take their wallet or something and see if they get mad. This is before you get empowerment, right? Like you could really see, you could kind of test them if you're really brave, to find out what their realization was like by being a little bit naughty. But I think the main point is just to observe and make sure that they're a person of good character. That's the main thing, and that they hold the lineage and have an understanding of the teachings and can express it to you in a way that you understand. Those are all the most important points. Having understood the ground now for embarking on the stages of the path in order to purify the temporary stains, it is first of all necessary to thoroughly train your stream of being to tame its unsuitability caused by having fallen under the power of unwholesome mental habit of deluded thinking. I shall now explain how to do that. Since immature beings are unable to journey even in the direction of the correct path through their own mental power, it is necessary from the very first to examine properly and then follow a qualified Vajra master who is the root of all the teachings of the Buddhas in general, and of correctly entering and fully traversing the path in particular. A master is indispensable, like a well-formed guide when you embark upon an unknown path. If you are in a foreign country and you have no map and you have no idea where you're going, you need a guide. You need somebody familiar with the territory, or you're just going to wander. A powerful escort when you travel through a dangerous area. When we start to engage with our mind and with these emotions, there are many, 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 many different kinds of obstacles, pitfalls, dangers. So we need somebody who can protect us in all of that. And that's like having a bodyguard. The guru also serves that function. Next, the guru serves like a ferryman when you cross to the other side of the river. You do not get yourself across the river. You rely on the ferryman to take you across the river. So this is a path of self effort, right? And so the power of devotion and the hook of compassion of the guru pulls you along the path. At the highest level, you recognize that any progress you make on this path is actually the blessings of the guru. There is no thing you do at all the whole time, right? You recognize this more and more because the guru really is the Dharmakaya. But you need to have confidence in that. But we start with the human guru because we are social creatures, and we need to start on that basis because we have no way to relate to the Dharmakaya from our confused perception of samsaric beings. So in order to make a guru is a kind of liberation through seeing, right? So just your contact with them is opening you up to this thing that before you had no access to. And then the more devotion you develop towards your master, the more you'll be able to see that nature state they have realized will start to become clear in you. This is the whole principle of Guru Yoga. Through this kind of harmonic resonance that occurs through devotion and compassion between you and the Lama, you actually recognize your state. And then that's where like the path really truly begins, right? Is this pointing out and recognition. Although all the sutras, tantras, and instructions have extensively discussed the characteristics of a master, they are in short as follows. His being is perfectly pure, and he has abandoned wrongdoing. Because he is untainted by flaws or downfalls in the conduct of whatever samaya or vow he has taken among the 3 sets of precepts, which are the foundation of all good qualities. He is beautified by not being ignorant about anything, and by his lifestyle, which is free from falling into extremes due to his great learning in the sutra system and in the tantras, statements, and instructions of the Mantrayanas. So they should have a good understanding of the view and obviously have confidence in it, but then their conduct should be sutra. Like I said, they should be bodhisattvas. They should be serving the people around them, very gentle, very caring. It's not, maybe they from time to time might use kind of wrathful energy, but that shouldn't be the go-to in general. You want to find somebody who's gentle, soft, kind, patient. Garchen Rinpoche, right? You want somebody like that. That's going to be your safest bet, right? Like it's possible to follow other kinds of gurus who are more wild, but you have to have more faith. And you have to be willing to go through it. And I don't recommend that. It's not easy. And there's very few people who can really do that. By having resolved the meaning of what he learned through reflection, he can distinguish the differences of the 6 limits and 4 modes. By taking this meaning to heart through meditation training, his qualities of experience and realization have grown like the waxing moon. He is endowed with the signs of progress of having advanced through the paths and bhumis. Thus, he has perfected the benefit of self by means of learning, reflection, and meditation. So essentially, you can just see that they are well established in their practice. They've engaged with the sutras, they've engaged with the tantras, they have confidence in their experience and are able to guide you personally based on your experience level, right? This is another important thing. A good lama is going to give different instructions to different people. Now, anytime you attend a public teaching, you're going to get their public and some lamas give very, very low level teachings because it's safest, right? Whenever you give a public teaching, and they only give like high level upadesha like Dzogchen to one-on-one. That's like the lama who's the strictest about this stuff. you have like Garchen Rinpoche or Dzogchen lamas who really give the whole thing from the very beginning. But they have a good way of explaining it so that it's not overwhelming, and so that's not too technical, and you can understand it at multiple levels, right? So this is another thing where the really good lamas, you can hear them from many different levels of understanding. Like you can hear this really basic level of like be kind and be present, all the way up to the highest levels of Dzogchen, right? So that's the best kind of teacher, and that's Garchen Rinpoche is a perfect example of that. Through his fully blossomed power of immaculate knowledge resulting therefrom, he possesses the kindness of accepting destined disciples with his compassionate action, which is not conceptual and not aimed at gain, honor, or reputation. You can pretty much see this. Who's seeking fame and who's not, right? Who's seeking money and who's not? Who's living a simple, more austere lifestyle? Who's demanding certain kinds of gifts and situations and is very temperamental about, like these are things to avoid. You want somebody who's acting like the yogis of old, content with very little, satisfied with very little, not very demanding, very patient with students. These are all the ways to know a lama is a good guide. Moreover, he is able to cut through misconceptions with his oral instructions. He can make realizations arise by pointing out the meaning. He can halt impure perception through the power of blessings. He can clear away hindrances to experience and bring forth enhancement of realization. In short, he is endowed with all the characteristics of spontaneously accomplishing the welfare of others by means of his knowledge, compassion, and ability. And these are the kinds of experiences that you might have in the presence of a lama such as this, but know that that's not necessarily always the enough, right? Because there are people who have high levels of meditative experience who can produce meditative experience in people around them, but they don't have good conduct. Those people do exist, right? So you want to have somebody who has good conduct, is kind, gentle, simple, patient, and also has some power. When you look at them, pay attention to them, you feel more love, you feel more devotion, you feel more compassion, you ought to have maybe meditation states arise. These sorts of things are good signs, right? So we have a few minutes left. I want to leave it open to some questions or comments. I know we covered an absolute ton. Anybody? Just turn on your mic if you do.
You explained it too thoroughly, Damien. There's no question.
Damien, when you give those notes that you always give it, will you detail out again those steps from seeing you're in mental trouble and now you recognize the view and oh, I don't
Yes.
recognize the view. What am I going to do next? And you go all the
Yes.
way down to you're sort of begging for forgiveness, maybe.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Let me write that down so I don't forget.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's based on these steps actually. So I find for my own personal stuff that I get solid, sense of I and don't want to speak in front of people, which I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I'm speaking in front of somebody, there's like other and me, and then I have really bad stage fright, like super awful.
Yeah.
And so what I do basically is avoid it. So I mean, it's kind of psychological to think that then you go, okay, should I just get up in front of people and start talking and then just do these practices like whatever, you know, like you described, I'd probably have to go down to the very beginning step.
Yeah.
Um, or is it okay to just avoid it and then eventually your enlightenment will take care of it without you having to go there?
In my experience, you got to address it. If it comes up regularly, then, just like even like right now, can you look at the fear directly and just like, what is it? What is it? What does it feel like? What texture is it? I used to sing in bands, so I had to work with all of this, right? And you have to ride it. You can't make it go away. If you fight it, that makes it stronger, right? But
Absolutely.
if you invite, okay, so the feeling of excitement and fear are the same emotion, right? One's interpreted as bad, one's interpreted as good, but it's literally the same stuff going on in your body, right? Like the same adrenaline, norepinephrine, the same jitteriness, the fast racing thoughts, all of that. But one we go, I don't like that, and one we go, I like it. So what you're trying to do is recognize that it's the thoughts on top of the emotions that is causing the problem. So if the more, like I also used to have panic attacks for a while. And if you try to get rid of those, they happen more, right? I had the best therapist I had. He told me the only way to get rid of this forever is to ask for them and to say, I want them. I want this to happen and I want it to last forever. And you have to actually kind of convince yourself that this is good. And this is true for every negative emotion. So this is like helpful stuff is yes, Pema Chodron's the queen of this, right? Accepting everything fully. But you can leave a little heroic energy into it, like really try to embrace it as best you can. But the Dzogchen method is kind of like the Vipassana Dzogchen. Instead of who am I, say what is it? What is fear? And that is the most powerful and effective method for anything. But the other one to go down to that's easy is to breathe in the fear of all sentient beings. May I experience this gives you some bravery around it, right? So may my fear take away all the fear beings are experiencing right now in slaughterhouses and orphanages, and may theirs all stop and I'll feel it for them. And so you get some bravery around your fear, and then you eventually have to look at it, right? Like these things, yes, as you practice, your capacity will increase, and so eventually you will be able to look at it and it'll be gone. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to address it right away, but if it's something you experience fairly regularly, that's good fuel for your fire. If you use that for your meditation, it'll say, like the tradition says, it'll cause your rigpa to blaze up, right? When you look right into rage or terror or a really strong desire, then you get the wisdom corresponding to it comes really strongly out, and it'll actually bring you up. You can like gain a realization in one shot. Like I've experienced this where like it has stopped being what it was for me and it started being something else. And so yeah, when you challenge yourself to engage with it a little bit, just try to keep you're getting in it, right? Like whenever it starts to be overwhelming, we're starting to identify with it, right? I am afraid.
That's right.
But we want to just keep it in our hands. And like Thich Nhat Hanh said, hold it like a baby, right? Hold your anger like a baby, hold your fear like a baby. Like you're okay. You can be here. I know you're scared, like start to have and notice that you're not the fear. You're the one holding the fear, and give yourself more permission to be with the emotion and for the emotion to not have to go somewhere, right? This is like a child that's freaking out, right? And so you don't want to like be quiet. That's not going to make them feel better. You need to hold them gently, and also like examine what are the physical sensations, what are the thoughts, what all that noticing keeps you from being in it, right? Like when we name our emotion, immediately we have some distance from it. Like when I teach special ed kindergarten, right? And so I have to like, you are feeling anger. This, I can see that you have anger right now. Like they don't, I am anger is what they experience. But when I say, oh, now I've made it an object for them and they can like start to look at it, now they can start to regulate. And this is true for all of us all the way down. So yeah, just starting to but if it's really big and too much, then wait. You don't have to deal with it right away. You don't need to like go jump out of an airplane, right? Like
I might have to. I've had it my whole life and now I'm like, pretty old. But I understand really what you're saying because I have I'm a therapist, so I have clients and I teach them this.
Yeah, I
I
bet.
was just wondering if we could bypass it through our meditation and not have to go through it.
You have to go through
That's
it, but
quicker.
the more you've meditated, the more power you'll have over it, right? Like the more likely you'll be able to just look at it and it'll dissolve right away is the result of your meditation. So yes and no. You're gonna have to dissolve it, but you can get yourself really well prepared to dissolve it, right? We
Okay.
have to go through everything. Um, but yeah, Marco just shared a whole bunch of links that are really, really helpful from Pema Chodron on this. And as you said, you know this all this stuff as being a therapist. But yes, your capacity increasing gives you, but the bad news of that is that to some extent your emotions get stronger the further you go. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the things we try to avoid can become shadows, right? Like this is partly, I think, what happens with like llamas who go sideways is that they keep avoiding one thing. They're progressing along the path, but there's one thing they don't want to look at, whether it's power, sex, money, whatever. There's one area they're not bringing their awareness to. And so this demon grows alongside their realization, right? Because it's getting this energy. So instead of dissolving the demon, it actually empowers the demon with the power of their realization. So the demon becomes that much more, and they're not looking at it, so they're just going into it and then they're coming out of it and then they're in the nature of mind, so they're not, so it's not a problem, right? They're literally not dealing with it. So that's the danger for this thing, is that it'll grow alongside you if you don't work with it. So I think in general it's better to work with it, but at a comfortable pace. And Tara really can help, right? That's her thing, is fear, right? So being green Tara while you ask a question, you might try that out too. Because how does Tara ask a question? Because for her like readiness is fear, right? Like it's fear in the positive side, right? Her energy is that fear she rides. She rides that same fundamental energy. So that practice might be helpful for you too. Yeah. Marco, were you going to say something? Did somebody say something?
No, Dan, no, just those resources there might be helpful dealing with fear. Payment, and also Bruce Tiff's book is really a great one.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Could I say something about that as well?
Of course.
So, like you, Damien, I, have been in rock and roll bands, and so you have to really deal with the stage fright thing there. And what worked for me was recognizing that the stage fright was just a function of the ego being afraid of being judged. You think, oh, am I going to be good enough? What are people going to think? I think that's why we get that stage fright. And once I decided that I just did not give a damn what anyone else thought about me, it completely disappeared. And from that point on, I just never had any stage fright. I just went up and had a good time. And, and that's another aspect of it, is just instead of, being afraid of the judgment, if that's what it is, recognize that whether you're reading poetry or whatever, or playing music or whatever it is that you're in front of people doing, you're giving them a gift, and so you just focus on that aspect of giving, and it makes that ego thing sort of go away. That worked for me anyways.
Yeah. And you are giving a gift, because when you ask a question in a group like this, almost always several other people have the same question, right? So it's always a gift to participate in group discussions. When you have a feeling or question or comment, somebody will be benefited by that. So you can also, like Dan is saying, share your question from that place of like, may this benefit everybody. And then that'll help you be brave around it too. And like I said, you can breathe in the stage fright, breathe in the fear around sharing, the insecurity, the failure. You can say like, may I be all the judged one. I'll take all the judgment. I'll take all the criticism, all of the spotlight that's uncomfortable, and everybody else can be free of it. And that can help you like walk towards it too. Yeah. from Pink Floyd. Yeah, that's right. Anything else from anyone?
Thank you, Damien.
My pleasure. Okay. We'll call that. I will look into the 8 gates for you, Grace, and I'll send out notes, including the going down the ladder instructions. As always, thank you so much for being here and participating in the conversation. I really appreciate all of that. Love all of you. Let's dedicate the merit. By this merit may all attain omniscience, having defeated the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Please
Thank you,
feel free
Damien.
to, yeah, you bet, email or WhatsApp me if you have any questions or thoughts. Otherwise, I'll see y'all next week. Good night, everybody. Good
Thank
night.
you.
You're welcome. Bye bye.